They'll call you crazy long before they call you chosen. That's the pattern, isn't it? The moment you start moving differently, thinking differently, speaking like you know something they don't, they stare. Not because they're curious. No, because deep down they feel it. That disruption, that divine discomfort your existence brings. You're not fitting in their boxes anymore. You're bending the rules they swore were unbreakable. And that scares them more than anything. They don't clap for the chosen one at the beginning. They stare, sideways glances, whispers behind your back like your presence is an inconvenience, like your very existence is something they forgot to approve. You see, when you're chosen, you're misunderstood. Not because you're wrong, but because you don't match the script. You don't walk like them, think like them, break like them. You walk into rooms that weren't built for you and still sit like the chair was made with your name on it. And that rattles something in people. Because when you're chosen, your light doesn't just shine, it exposes. And no one likes being exposed. Being chosen doesn't mean crowned. It means crushed. Crushed under pressure most couldn't breathe under. You wake up to battles no one sees. Smile through storms no one survives. And when people wonder why you're so distant, it's because you've already buried parts of yourself trying to be digestible. You've watered yourself down, dimmed your flame, made yourself small so they'd stop calling you too much. But the truth? You were never too much. They were never enough. They weren't built to handle chosen. People forget that chosen ones are forged in silence. While the world parties, you're being pulled. While they chase comfort, you're chased by calling. And it doesn't ask for permission. It interrupts your plans, rips away your distractions, and drops you in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a whisper. Go. Go where? Go how? That's not the question. The question is, will you? Will you move when you can't see? Will you speak when your voice shakes? Will you rise when everything around you screams, stay down? It's funny. They want your strength, but not your scars. They admire the shine, but run from the shadow that made it. Because the chosen don't just fight battles, they are the battlefield. You carry weight that should break you, but instead it shapes you. Your back bends, but doesn't snap. Your heart bleeds, but keeps beating. And that makes people uncomfortable, because you're proof that pain can birth purpose. That broken doesn't mean buried. That survival isn't luck, it's identity. You're not chosen because you're special. You're chosen because you're obedient. You listen when it hurts. You follow when it's lonely. You trust when everything screams betrayal. And that obedience, that's where the power lies. Not in applause, not in popularity. In obedience. In moving when no one else would. In believing when no one else did. In carrying the weight of destiny when everyone else dropped theirs. So when you feel alone, good. That's confirmation. When they mock you, perfect. That's validation. When you start to question if you're losing your mind, that's the clearest sign you're stepping into purpose. Because chosen ones don't walk the easy path. They walk the one with thorns, with betrayal, with nights that crush and mornings that mock. But through it all, they keep walking, not because they're fearless, but because they're focused. Not because they're strong, but because they know. You weren't picked by people. You were pulled by something greater. You didn't audition for this. You were born for it. And deep down, even when you try to ignore it, even when you wish it away, you know it. That ache in your soul when you settle. That fire in your chest when you shrink. That whisper that won't let you sleep at night. You know what it is. You've always known. And now you're being reminded. Because the time for hiding is over. You ever notice how the loudest ones are usually the most afraid? The ones who bark orders, puff their chests, act like kings, but deep inside, hollow, empty, shivering little puppets trying to look bigger than the strings that control them. That's the thing about power, the real kind. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need parades or applause or 100,000 likes. It walks in quiet. It waits. It watches. And when it moves, it moves everything. But you were never meant to play pretend. You weren't born for the stage. They built it to distract you. You were never supposed to blend in, but they fed you lies dressed as rules. Speak when spoken to. Don't stand out. Don't feel too much. They clipped your wings and handed you trophies for crawling. And then they laughed when you forgot how to fly. That's the joke, isn't it? Turn fire into ashes, then mock the cold. They tell you to follow the blueprint. Go to school. Get the job. Keep your head down. Don't ask why. Don't feel too deeply. Don't dream too loudly. And the moment you dare to question it, you become the problem. You're too intense. You're too sensitive. You're too rebellious. No, you're just awake. And that scares them, because they've spent their whole lives sedated by comfort, while you're starting to feel again. You're starting to see again. The world doesn't like mirrors. It likes masks. And people, they'll do anything to protect their illusion. The moment you pull off your mask and show up raw, show up real, they panic. Because your truth threatens their lie. Your freedom challenges their cage. They'll call you dangerous, unpredictable, unstable, not because you're wrong, but because you're unshakable. And unshakable is terrifying in a world addicted to approval. You were meant to disrupt, to rattle cages, to ignite hearts that forgot how to burn. And maybe that's why you felt like an outcast, like a mistake, like a glitch in the system. But glitches aren't flaws, they're signs, warnings, proof the program is breaking. And baby, if you're glitching, it means the system couldn't hold you. It means you're the upgrade they never saw coming. They want you quiet, because your roar exposes their silence. They want you small because your rise reminds them of everything they gave up. But you didn't come this far to be digestible. You came to be undeniable. So let them talk. Let them squirm. Let them misunderstand. You weren't made to be understood. You were made to be felt. To shake rooms just by standing in them. To leave echoes behind long after you've gone. To make people uncomfortable enough to wake up. And when they say you're changing, good. That means it's working. That means the old version of you is crumbling and the real one's finally stepping through. Don't apologize for growing. Don't flinch when they flinch, because they'll call you crazy right up until the moment they call you genius. Tick, tick, tick. That's the sound of what they fear most. Not a bomb, not a scream, but a mind waking up. See, they don't panic when you fail. They don't tremble when you stumble. Oh no, they only start sweating when you think, when you pause, when you question. Because that silence, that stillness, that's where rebellion is born. Not with guns or banners, but with one dangerous little thought. What if they're wrong? You were raised in a circus where clowns wear suits and the ringmasters preach fear. They taught you to clap on cue, laugh when told, cry only when scripted. Every day was a performance, wasn't it? Smile for the cameras, hide the cracks. Be polite. Be nice. Be agreeable. Be normal. But you never quite fit the costume. It itched. It pulled. It suffocated. So you twisted in your seat, fidgeted in your skin, until one day you stood. And just like that, the audience turned. Oh, how they loved you when you played your part. But when you walked off stage, when you tore the mask off and said, no more, that's when the whispers started. That's when they called you broken, lost, unstable. But isn't that funny? You finally told the truth, and they called it madness. You see, society has a script for you, a neat little checklist. School, career, marriage, mortgage, misery. They hand it to you wrapped in gold and call it success. And if you dare to say, I want more, if you ask, who wrote this garbage? They look at you like you've set fire to the church, because you did. You burned their idol, the idol of comfort, of compliance, of controlled dreams. They'll try, though. Oh, they'll try. With labels, with shame, with threats wrapped in concern. You're too intense. You're not thinking straight. You've changed. Damn right you've changed. You evolved. You stopped living someone else's lie and started writing your own chaos. And chaos. Chaos is truth with its makeup off. It's the moment the music stops and you realize you were dancing to a song you hated. Let them call you dangerous. Let them tighten their grip. Because the ones who tremble when you speak are the ones who built their world on silence. And you were never meant to be quiet. You weren't built for the background. You're not wallpaper. You're the wrecking ball they didn't see coming. The voice in the dark that says, this isn't enough. The question in the crowd that makes the speaker stutter. The crack in the glass that turns into an avalanche. You don't need permission to be real. You don't need approval to be alive. You don't need their comfort if it costs your soul. Tear the script. Burn the stage. Walk out of the circus and into the storm. Because out there, that's where the wild things are. That's where truth lives. Where pain isn't hidden. Where joy isn't packaged. Where people scream, cry, fight, and feel without apology. That's where you belong. Not in their cage, but in the chaos that built the sky. They told you to stay humble, didn't they? Be patient. Be quiet. Wait your turn. Respect the order. Funny thing about order, it always benefits the ones who created it. They sit at the top of a pyramid they built with your silence, your obedience, your fear. And every time you stand too tall, they whisper, sit down. Every time you shine too bright, they say, dim it down. Because your light exposes their shadows, your rise reminds them they're still crawling. You were never meant to be small, but they knew that. Oh, they knew. The moment you spoke your truth, the room got colder. Not because you lied, but because you didn't. Because truth, when spoken by someone who isn't supposed to speak, becomes a weapon. And they fear that weapon more than they fear any fist or fire. They fear the voice that won't bow, the stare that won't break, the soul that refuses to shrink. Look at them. So proud in their titles, their ties, their carefully constructed facades. Kings of plastic empires, queens of hollow praise. They clap for each other in rooms filled with echoes, mistaking noise for meaning. But when you walk in, the air changes. Why? Because you didn't ask for their permission. You didn't kiss the ring. You didn't beg for a seat at their rigged table. You brought your own damn chair, and they hate that. They want you invisible, not gone, not dead, just invisible enough to not disturb the illusion. They want your work, not your worth, your time, not your voice, your energy, not your essence. And when you refuse, when you say, I won't bleed for this circus anymore, that's when the masks slip. That's when the claws come out. Because a system doesn't break when the weak collapse, it breaks when the strong say no more. You ever notice how they love your potential, but hate your power? They applaud your dreams as long as they stay dreams. But the moment you make a move, the moment you act on it, suddenly you're arrogant. You're too much. You're not a team player. Because the game was never designed for you to win. It was built for you to run in circles until you die tired and obedient. But you stopped running. You saw through the game. You saw the strings. You saw the fear behind their smiles. And now they label you as unstable, unpredictable, rebellious. Because nothing terrifies a machine more than a cog that grows teeth. A cog that says, I'm not part of this anymore. A cog that becomes a spark, and sparks become fire. And fire doesn't apologize. Fire doesn't ask if it's welcome. Fire doesn't wait for approval. It burns. It consumes. It transforms. And that's what you are now, a transformation in motion. A reminder that even a whisper, when spoken at the right frequency, can shatter glass. That even one soul fully awakened can topple towers built on lies. They like to say, you've changed, as if staying the same was ever an accomplishment, as if growth was a betrayal. But you were never meant to stay frozen in their idea of who you should be. You were never built to rot politely in someone else's version of comfort. You were built to shed, to break, to burn down the parts of you that no longer fit and walk away from the ashes without flinching. But they don't want that, do they? No, they want you stuck, predictable, contained, easy to manage, easy to forget. They'll guilt you for outgrowing them. They'll twist your evolution into arrogance. They'll say, you think you're better now? As if you owe them the courtesy of your stagnation. But they don't see the nights you wrestled with yourself, the mornings you woke up haunted by doubt, the days you questioned whether you were strong enough to keep climbing. They just see you standing taller now, and it scares them. Not because you've changed, but because they haven't. You see, people love the idea of you until it confronts the reality of them. They're fine when you're silent. They're supportive when you're struggling. But the moment you start speaking in a tone that doesn't ask for approval, the moment your wins don't come with disclaimers or apologies, that's when they flinch. Because deep down, they're not afraid of your failure. They're afraid of your success. Because your growth forces them to see their own decay. So they start whispering, not to understand, but to contain. You've forgotten where you came from. No, you remember exactly where you came from. You just refuse to stay there. You've changed. Damn right. Because survival isn't about staying the same. It's about adapting, transforming, rising. But they want your loyalty more than your liberty. Your old version more than your future. They want a familiar ghost, not a living revolution. And they hate it. Not because you've become evil, but because you've become honest. Honest with yourself. Honest about what you deserve. Honest about who they really are when the masks come off. And truth, when it walks into a room full of denial, always feels like violence. But let them flinch. Let them gossip. Let them choke on the sound of your steps when you walk away from the cages they tried to dress up as kingdoms. You don't owe anyone the comfort of your silence. You don't owe them the corpse of your past just to prove you're still humble. They'll say you've changed like it's a crime, but change is the most natural rebellion there is. Flowers bloom, stars explode, oceans rise, and you're just another force of nature refusing to be predictable. So walk different, speak louder, look them in the eye and smile without explanation. You're not rude, you're real. You're not distant, you're discerning. You're not heartless, you've just stopped offering yours to those who only know how to crush it. Let them misinterpret your peace as pride. Let them label your clarity as cruelty. Let them be uncomfortable. Growth was never meant to make others feel safe. It was meant to make you feel free. They want the power, but not the pressure. The crown, but not the weight. They want the fire without the heat, the light without the burn. But you were never built for halfway. You were never meant to live in between. And now they watch you, confused, even offended. Because you didn't just survive what they thought would kill you. You came back laughing. You came back louder. You came back aware. Aware of how fake the applause was, how hollow their advice sounded, how their love only lasted as long as your silence did. You were expected to collapse neatly, weren't you? Quietly, without inconvenience. They liked their casualties clean. But here you are, walking chaos, breathing proof that broken things can't be buried when they decide they still want to grow. And it unsettles them. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're not dependent anymore. You've detached from their permission. You've severed the strings. And suddenly they don't know how to play you. See, they needed you fragile. Not because they cared, but because it made them feel strong. They called it helping when it was just control. They called it helping when it was just control. They called it advice when it was really manipulation. They smiled, not out of joy, but out of fear. Fear that you might notice how free you've become. And the scariest thing about freedom, it's contagious. One taste and you'll never beg again. You speak with a tone now, not loud, just certain. You move like you've met yourself in the dark and made peace with the monster. You don't flinch when they raise their voice anymore because you've heard louder screams inside your own skull. You don't shrink under pressure because you've walked through days that tried to crush you into nothing, and you're still here, sharper than ever. You don't just survive, you adapt, you evolve. And evolution to the stagnant looks like defiance. So they whisper, they distance, they warn others. They've changed. And yes, you have. You've unlearned the lies. You've burned the masks. You've outgrown the stage they tried to keep you performing on. You've become fluent in silence, but deadly in truth. Now your presence disrupts their comfort, and your absence exposes their intentions. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that didn't know better. But you do now. You see the games before they're played. You smell the envy before it's spoken. You catch the shade even when it's disguised as light. And while they spiral in pretense, you walk in purpose. Because you no longer operate for applause, you move with alignment. You don't want validation, you want velocity. Forward. Always forward. And if they can't keep up, they'll call you too much, too fast, too intense. Let them. Let them panic over your power. Let them rewrite history because they can't control your present. You were never meant to stay small just to be loved by those who fear their own expansion. You're not too much, you're just not for the faint-hearted. And now that you've tasted what it means to choose yourself over their comfort, there's no going back.